Hello, and welcome once again to Learning Music with Pat. The last time I was here, I talked about taking care of the instruments, how to clean them, how to put them together, how to be careful with them. And I want to continue with that today, but I'm going to also go into octaves and how instruments play octaves. And the way I'm going to combine the two together, starting with the saxophone. How do you keep the saxophone taken care of, and how do you play octaves on it? And the reason I want to do the saxophone is it's the easiest to explain on this instrument. But I want you to take a look at my curved soprano saxophone. You don't see them very often, but they're certainly not rare. Very difficult to play. This is very, very old. And it's missing a couple of keys, not missing in the sense that something's wrong with it, but there are usually 3 side keys on this, and there's only 2 here. There are usually 3 side keys on this side, but there's only 2 here. And I don't know whether it's because this particular instrument is so old that they never put them on at that age. This was made, I don't know how many years ago, but it's very unusual in that it's so old, or whether it's just so tiny that there's no place to put them, because this instrument surely is very, very tiny. So how do you take care of a saxophone? I brought this one down because it weighs less and it's easier to carry than some of the other full-size saxophones. The only thing you have to do, really, this mouthpiece comes off, and here you have cork, and you would put cork grease around, I've already done it, around the side of the instrument. And then all you have to do is slip on your mouthpiece. Your mouthpiece, of course, has the reed on it, and you will have already moistened the reed so the instrument would play. The great challenge of the saxophones and the clarinets is to keep the reeds moist enough so they don't squeak and squawk. Now, this particular instrument is extremely old, and old enough so you don't have the ivory keys. They're all metal, and in the back everything is metal and not ivory. So I want to show you a little bit about this instrument. The way I got it was interesting. My mother had passed on, and my sister and I, she's a musician also, we were walking around the streets in the city where we were, which isn't Keene, but it was another city, and we walked into a music store just to see what we could see because we're both musicians. And I looked up, and there this was, hanging from the ceiling. And I'd wanted a small little curved soprano for quite a while, but they're very expensive, and I hadn't had a chance to buy one. So I looked up, and there it was, hanging from the ceiling, and I thought, that's an unsafe place for it, but of course they had it attached so it wouldn't fall. And I poked my sister on the shoulder, and I said, look up, see what you see. This is a little tiny curved soprano. And she looked at me and she said, buy it. Just 2 words, buy it. And I says, okay, I can do that. So I walked over to the store manager and I managed to purchase this one. The only cleaning requirement for this is that in the mouthpiece you make sure that the reed is moist, you make sure you have your cork grease on. This curved area is called the neck piece. This will come off. I'm not going to take it off now, but there's a little screw right there. You can take that whole neck piece off, and then you can wipe around the body of the instrument. This is the bell. You can buy swabs, very heavy, thick swabs that you can stick right into the bell to keep the instrument dry and take the moisture out, and a smaller swab that you can go down this part of the instrument to keep the pads dry. So how does an instrument like this play an octave? This is the easiest thing. All you have to do, if you look in the back, there's this little raised area. It's called a thumb rest. It's not a thumb note or a thumb hole. It's a thumb rest. And the octave key is right above it. And if you look, when I put this key down, this little key on top bounces up. There's a series of rods that make it possible for it to do that. And when that happens, you are automatically bounced up 1 octave. And then when you don't want the octave anymore, simply take your finger off the key, and this little key goes back down, and you're back at the lower octave. So I'm going to try to do this This is the thumb rest. Maybe I should turn around a little bit so the angle is better. Press it up, press it down. Pressed up, you have your octave. Let it up, and then you have your regular octave. So you can go up and down and up and down. And almost every single note in the scale, you can get an octave this way on this particular instrument. So let me try this. The reed, I hope, is still moist, otherwise you may get a squeak. That's the octave, the low note and the high note, the low note and the high note. That's all there is to it on the saxophone. Now, the next I'm going to show you is the flute. The flute's a little, it's easy to take care of. I'm going to put this cap on, and I'm going to twist the mouthpiece. I twist the neck piece a little so that the cap does not rest on the table, and that'll help prevent the cap from coming off. Now, the flute is also fairly easy to take care of. The only thing you really have to do, if you pull it apart, you will note this is the head joint. It's just going to slide out. This is the body of the instrument, and down here is the foot part, the foot joint. Now you can take a piece of alcohol, take a little cloth with alcohol on it. I have a little piece right here. And you would take and rub the instrument, the part of the instrument that goes inside, rub it with the alcohol and clean it off. You don't have to do it every time you play. You only have to do it every several times you play. And you can also do it a little bit in the inside, and while you're about it, do the mouthpiece, because that'll disinfect the mouthpiece. That's practically nothing. And then on this joint here, just rub around this part that goes inside the foot joint, and a little bit in the inside. You don't want to get any alcohol on the pads. And then you're all set to go. You can also put a little bit of alcohol in the inside of this foot joint where it joins, being very careful not to get any of the pads, and also on the edge. Then when you're ready to put it back together again. And you can get swabs to clean in the inside. Now you're going to know when it needs to be cleaned like this, because when it gets a little bit stiff and it's harder to put in, you put it in carefully, it slides in very easily. If you get to the point where it doesn't slide in very easily, then you're going to know it's time to clean it. Because what you're going to get is a little bit of black residue, and that's what's making it stick. And when you just wipe it around with that cloth with the alcohol on it, and then it takes that all off, and you can slide it in quite easily. Now this little instrument has a bunch of little lines, and that shows you where to set it, where to twist it to. And people like their mouthpieces in different positions. I like mine a little bit toward my lips. So I adjust it that way. And then to get an octave, sometimes you just, let me show you the keys in the back. You put your thumb here, then there's another key up here. That's how the octave mechanism works. Now, with the flute, it's a little bit different than some of the other instruments, because sometimes you're going to want a special key to get a high note, and sometimes you're not going to need it at all. So I want to demonstrate by playing 3 Gs. A G is this 3 fingers. If I were to go all the way down, it's interesting, you can hear the scale just by my putting my fingers down. Okay, so let me play the G. The G is this 3, and I have my finger on this note. In the back, I'll play 3 of them. The lower G, the higher G, and the extremely high G. And it'll go like this if I have it set right. It needs to be set a little bit different. Sometimes you have to fool around to get it exactly the way you want it. 3 G's. Try it again. The flutes are awfully good at playing high notes. I sometimes will teach my students to do this, to get these 3 G's, because if they play it loud enough, I tell them they can really impress their friends. The high notes are really so high on this instrument, and that's the way that you would do it on a flute. Flute's very versatile. It plays notes very high. As a matter of fact, these are the octaves of the flute. I may as well show it to you now as I put this flute down. You have to be careful how you put them down. If you look at this, the lowest note on the flute is a C, but you've got 2 more octaves of C's. And here's a low C, but here's the highest C you can get. These notes go way above the staff. Now sometimes I have here a staff and it has the 5 lines on it. What if you want to write notes above the staff or below the staff? You can do that easily just by adding the extra lines. You don't draw them all the way across like you do these staff lines, because otherwise you'd have so many lines you wouldn't really be able to read the music. So they keep it at 5 lines, and then you just keep adding lines as it goes up. This is a very, very high C. It's the highest note that this instrument can play, and this is the low C. That's the lowest note that this instrument can play. And I just arranged it so you can see the notes going up higher and higher and higher. And it's just a very interesting thing to play. This G, this was the low G I played, this was the higher G I played, and this was the high above that I played. All 4 lines up above the staff, and yet it could still go up to the C above that. Flute is a very nice instrument, has a beautiful tone, and it's very handy on the high notes. Now what I'm going to take next is the clarinet. I'm going to move these instruments around a little. The clarinet is a little different. It's different in the way that it handles octaves, and it's different in a lot of ways. First, let me do the octaves. I think that would be easier to do it than to pull it. I'm going to have to pull it all apart to show you how to take care of it, but what I want to do is just play the octaves. It's going to sound different. I hope that the reed is wet enough. Now, that's not a true octave, and I'm going to explain. But for this instrument, the instrument high register is not the same as the low register. So when you play up an octave, you're not getting an octave. So instead of saying that this instrument, you have an octave key, in the back, what you have, it's called a register key. The register key will bounce you up to the high register, but it's not a true octave. Now you'll notice that you have this here where you put your thumb. This is not a thumb rest, it's an actual note. You can play notes with it. It's an open hole note. And you put your thumb on it, and then when you want to bounce up to the higher register, you just put your hand on this key and you'll go up to the next register. It won't be an octave, but it'll be more than an octave in 4 or 5 notes. So it's a register key, not an octave key. Now, what that means in practical terms is that you're going to have to learn 2 sets of fingerings for the clarinet. You have a fingering for the lower register notes, and you have another set of fingerings for the upper notes. So therefore, you're learning 2 sets of fingerings to play a clarinet. Now let me pull it apart for you, because it has some cleaning and some challenges there. You have the clarinet, it'll come off in 5 parts. I'm not going to pull the mouthpiece off from this. The second part here is the barrel. Let me put this down. You have the mouthpiece, and next right to it, this is a barrel, and that's what it looks like. It looks just like a barrel. There's no keys on it, but you can use it for tuning. And then you have the upper part of the body right here, and then you have the lower part of the body right here, and it's divided by this ring that you get in the middle, and the bottommost part is called the bell. As I've said before, any part of an instrument that kind of flares out, this is the bell. The bell has no parts, no notes in it. I'm not gonna separate the bell from the rest of the body, but it easily comes off. Now what I'm gonna do is separate the two joints, and this is where it can be tricky. You see there is a metal, actually two metal pieces right here. One is laying on top of the other. When you take the clarinet apart, you put your hand down and it will raise this top piece. When you hold it down like that, it raises the top piece, and then you can easily slide the second piece off. Now, when you get it all off, and I mean you take the barrel off, you take the bell off, then you can just take I take a cloth, and it's got a string and a weight on it. And then you just pull it down through, and you clean it that way. And I imagine you can get swabs for it, too, that you just stick down. Let me take the barrel off. Whoops. This is a little tight. Where you would put your cork grease is going to be any place that you find cork. You'll find the cork grease, and that you put the cork grease on it. And you're going to have two places here that you put the cork grease on. And if I were to take the barrel off from the mouthpiece, which I guess I'll do to show you, then you have cork on the mouthpiece itself. You want to put cork grease on all of this. So I'm going to do that right now just to show you. I didn't have a chance to do it this morning. You need to make sure that it does have the cork grease on it, because otherwise it's very tight and it's hard to get the pieces together. So I will do that. Now I'm going to spend time in showing you how to put the top part of the body together with the lower part, because this is where, if you don't do it right, you can certainly do some damage to the instrument and have problems with it. The rule of thumb is, generally, if you actually damage or a key is damaged, you usually cannot get the notes below where the damage is. So supposedly, if I damaged a top, for some reason damaged the top part of the instrument, then I could play to where the damaged note is, the damaged key, but the damaged key won't play and all notes below it won't play. I can only play what's above it. Now, let me put this together so I can show you how careful you have to be. The top part of the clarinet, the bottom part of the clarinet. This is one of these metal pieces I pointed out to you before. If I hold it down just right, it will pop up. And this has this other little metal piece right there. Very, very important that you don't jam them together. And when you put the clarinet together, one piece has to lay on top of the other piece. So I'm going to do this now. Here's where its normal position would be. I put my hand down over it, particularly over this note right here. It pops up. See how it pops up? Then I gently take the rest of the instrument and put it on, but I ease it in so that it slides down underneath that top part. I hope you can see that. I'll try it again. Put it on, make sure this top metal piece is up, kind of roll it around and ease it in underneath it. Then When I let go, that top metal piece rests right on top of the bottom one, no damage, and the instrument is fine. Let me put on the barrel. In tuning, we're going to get into tuning next time. This barrel can be used to help tune the clarinet. If you want it flatter, you pull it out. If you want it sharper, you put it in as far as you can. Now I'll put the bell on. Even though the bell may not seem to be so important, it adds to the length of the tube, which adds to the pitch. And there it is. Now you can see that it went together a lot more easily than it was for me to take it apart. And the reason for that was I put the cork grease on. You would, by the way, never use cork grease on a flute. Don't use any kind of grease at all on the flute. And there it is all together. It's not that hard to do. I want to show you another clarinet that I have here. I guess we have time for that. This is an old metal clarinet. I can't play it because it has too much damage to it. It has to be repaired. But this flute is made out of metal, extremely old, and there was a period of time I can remember when I was in high school. That was in the 1950s that I was in high school, believe it or not. And they had, kids were playing metal clarinets. Now you can't pull it apart to clean it. It's a one-piece instrument. I don't have a mouthpiece for it, but you can see it's made like any other clarinet. Here's your note that your thumb would rest on, and here's the key that you would use to bring it up another octave. All the keys are there. It's just it really needs a lot of repair. This spring is completely out, and I wouldn't be able to play any of the notes below it. So this is the old metal ones. And I can remember in high school, I was playing saxophone, and I really wanted a metal clarinet because they were shiny and they were beautiful. This is silver. I don't polish it. I don't do anything like that. You can tell it's real silver or real gold if it should tarnish. My father had a sousaphone. Every few weeks he took the whole thing apart and polished it. It took him all day to do it with the valve work and so forth. But it was real. The lacquers that they have today, they will never tarnish. This flute is not real silver. This is real silver. The flute is not, and it will never tarnish. It has a lacquer on it, and it looks bright. This lacquer is a darker shade of silver than some other more modern instruments. So I have students that were talking to me about my little black flute, and in pictures it looks like it's gray or black. So that's how you take care of them. If you join me next time, I'm going to talk to you of how instruments are tuned up and do a little more octave work with some of the other smaller instruments. So thank you for joining me. Please join me next time.